Hello, this is Dennis Polis with another response to Open Discussioner. His latest is a three-part video. Originally the last part was entitled How Dare You? Hence the title of this video, How I Dare. Sadly, these three parts present very little new. The existence of God, as I showed in video 15, can be deduced from premises which are absolutely necessary for the operation of scientific thought.
Dr. Polis only proved there must be a reason that laws remain constant, that he labels God. Despite Dr. Polis claiming it wasn't a personal God, he continues to argue as though it is a personal and supernatural God that he has proven. This shows Dr. Polis is guilty of the fallacy of equivocation. And whenever he claims he has proven God, replace God with the reason laws remain constant, and his claims no longer make any sense.
What I showed was, and Honest Discussioner has not disputed this in any way, that there is a self-sustaining source for the continued operation of the laws of nature, and through the laws of nature for all material reality. So what I proved was that there is a source for the universe which maintains it in existence. Now, I claim that this meets the definition of God. Let's take a look at the dictionary and see if in fact that is true. Here we are. God. 1. The one supreme being, the creator and ruler of the universe. You'll note that the capitalization that Honest Discussioner objects to is required for good English usage by the dictionary. Now let's see if I prove the elements of the definition. Well, a being which maintains the entire universe in existence certainly is justly called the supreme being. Secondly, naturalists agree that the creation of the universe is a consequence of the laws of nature. So the source of those laws is certainly responsible for the creation of the universe and is the creator. Finally, the laws of nature are the rules by which the universe operates. And so the source of those laws is the ruler of the universe. So every element in the dictionary definition is a consequence of what I proved. What he does object to is something which I didn't even claim to prove in my video 15, but which I have addressed indirectly in other videos. In video 14, I showed that the laws of nature have an intentional nature. They are in the same genus as human committed intentions, and they satisfy Franz Brentano's definition of intentionality as aboutness. In videos 17 to 20, I showed that evolution has well-defined targets, and that means are prepared in advance of ends. All of these facts go to show that the laws of nature evidence mind. And since the source of these laws is the God whose existence I have proven, that God is a source of intentionality. A source of intentionality certainly is justly called a mind.
Dr. Polis then asserts my claim that magic would falsify naturalism is unreasonable, because magic is that which is outside of the norm and therefore not repeatable. That God is the maintainer of laws and doesn't deviate from that. Dr. Polis, however, is a Christian who believes in the resurrection. Therefore, miracles would have to be a temporary change in the laws of nature, rendering his argument null and void and naturalism still falsifiable. God showing up and performing real magic that can be consistently verified would falsify the claim of naturalism.
This sounds very reasonable, but it's not. He wants something magical. Yet the idea of being magical means that it is out of the norm. At the same time that he wants it to be magical or out of the norm, he also wants it to be repeatable or in the norm. Thus, his criterion, the thing which he wants us to establish in order to show that naturalism is wrong, is self-contradictory. Now I want to point out two things about Honest Discussioner's response. First, he doesn't really respond to my objection. My objection was that he wants something which is both repeatable, and so quite normal, and exceptional, so as to be magical. You can't have both. If something's magical, it's not normal, and if something is repeatable, it is normal. Secondly, no matter what I believe, if I believed that the moon was made of green cheese, that would not justify irrationality on honest discussioner's part.
Dr. Polis then compares me to someone who is stuck inside a room and refuses to believe that the light he sees coming from outside the room is in fact from outside the room. I will then compare him to someone who has never left that room and insists the light bulb isn't the true source of light in the room because we don't understand everything about the light bulb. Polis then describes naturalism and Christianity as both faiths, but different, since Christianity is based in the existence of God, and God is a proven fact, and therefore naturalism is irrational since it maintains there is no God. Again, he is guilty of the fallacy of equivocation because, well, Christianity is based on the existence of an intelligent God. He is using the faith of naturalism in an attempt to prove the existence of God, and therefore the correct faith of Christianity. If a God exists and we're capable of understanding it, him, her, then guess what? It's natural. If not, then by definition it is an unknown. Calling the unknowable supernatural is labeling ignorance in an attempt to call oneself wise.
The problem here is that honest discussioner has not shown a single point at which I've gone against the scientific consensus. What I have gone against is the naturalist spin on science.
Again, I will have to appeal to my guest refuter.
Of course, the majority of scientists don't necessarily agree with me.
Yeah.
As to the majority of science being on my side, there's a difference between science and scientists. Everything I say is compatible with all of the science I know.
This is true.
Of course, the majority of scientists don't necessarily agree with me, but they are not science. When they disagree, they're disagreeing on philosophical interpretations. Note that while honest discussioner is long on generalities and distortions, he's very short on facts. He's been unable to cite a single instance of me distorting science. I also asked him, when we were discussing progress toward a naturalistic model of consciousness, for an example of such progress. Honest discussioner seems to be constitutionally unable to grasp the subject-object distinction. Let me try to explain it in a very clear and simple way. In every act of knowing, there's a known object and a knowing subject. This polarity, the difference between the subject and the object, is the subject-object distinction. In the brain, we have contents which represent the objects that we know. They represent our sensations by neural impulses. Some nerves are activated, others are unactivated. Patterns of activation can be detected by functional magnetic resonance imaging. In the Camatini and Tong study, which honest discussioner is so fond of, this is exactly what was done. There was made a representation of what portions of the brain were activated, and when subjects were looking at bar patterns, lo and behold, a bar pattern was activated in the brain. This activation is the contents. It's a representation of the contents which the subject was viewing. Yes, the subject was aware of the contents, but the observations in the Camatini and Tong study do not show that the subject was aware. What they show is that the brain was activated in a certain way. So here is the challenge for honest discussioner. If he wants me to believe that the Camatini and Tong study is really observing subjectivity, really observing the fact that the subject is aware of the contents represented in the brain, let him give me an argument leading from the data in the Camatini and Tong study to the conclusion that there is subjective awareness of that data. Not just that there is a correlation between subjective awareness and the observations, but that the observations themselves entail the fact of subjective awareness. If honest discussioner can do that, then I will agree that this is an observation of subjectivity per se. But, as I suspect, if honest discussioner is unable to do that, he must acknowledge that in fact it is not an observation of subjectivity.
Dr. Polis then claims that I am shooting at the wrong target when I point to brain states correlating to mind states, and that he believes brain states do reflect what they are attending to.
We have content and we have awareness of content. Any model of mind must represent both. But the naturalist model can only explain content and the processing of content. Naturalists haven't the faintest idea of how to represent awareness.
Of course, I already showed this isn't the case. The Camatini and Tong study clearly states our approach provides a framework for the readout of fine-tuned representations and their subjective contents.
We have content and we have awareness of content.
This means they know how to represent at least a part of subjective awareness. Polis states that the only way to study awareness is introspection. Then he mischaracterizes the study.
The Cartesian theater is a concept developed by Daniel Dennett in order to illustrate our common experience-driven understanding of mind.
One of the concepts that you use, do you still find this useful, this whole notion of the Cartesian theater? You still talk about it? Still people ask about it?
Well, yeah, I still find it useful to warn people about the mistake of the Cartesian theater.
I don't really believe that there is such a thing as the Cartesian theater, but it does serve to illustrate the elements necessary for a theory of mind to be adequate to our experience. In the Cartesian theater there are two elements. There is a presentation illustrated by the screen and the speakers, which is the content I've been discussing, and there is an observer, the so-called homunculus, who illustrates our awareness of the presented content. Now let's look at the experiment that Open Discussioner has been bringing up. What it does, effectively, is put a camera into the Cartesian theater, and it takes a picture of the screen. Honest Discussioner believes that taking a picture of the screen is the same as taking a picture of the subject. Of course it isn't, and the illustration clearly shows this.
No, they took a picture of the screen, and then they said, among the things on that screen, the subject is aware of the egg. He refuses to acknowledge that the Camatini and Tong study studied awareness of the content without using introspection. Dr. Polis claims that what they are attending to is not what they are aware of. But this doesn't make sense given his theory. His theory is that data processing and content all happen in the brain. A different subsystem is entirely responsible for awareness of the content, and yet part of that awareness is in fact happening in the brain. Given Polis's theory, we should not have any data on the subject except what the subject reports, and yet we can know that what the subject is attending to. Lastly, Dr. Polis misunderstands my point when I say subjectivity is the data, in reference to the Camatini and Tong study. He thinks I am implying that subjectivity is simply data, when in fact I was saying that the data in the Camatini and Tong study was in reference to subjectivity. The data presented in that study was about the subjective awareness. That was what I meant.
I'm glad that Honest Discussioner has clarified that point. Perhaps we can agree to some extent. The study was about subjective awareness, but it was not a study of awareness per se. Nothing in the study would lead one to believe, independently of testimony on the part of the subject, that there was any awareness present at all. Still, it was a study of the contents of awareness. As I said earlier, awareness is part of a relationship. The contents we are aware of and the subject of awareness are inseparable in the act of being aware. But still, there are two poles. Honest discussioner apparently fails to recognize this.